Well, we are continuing our study of Hebrews, and we are in a new chapter. We're starting chapter 9. So I draw your attention to Hebrews chapter 9. We'll be in verses 1 through 10 this morning. I'm going to read the passage, and at the end I will say, "This is the word of the Lord," and I would invite you to respond by saying, "Thanks be to God," because we are thankful to God for his word. So hear the word of the Lord from Hebrews 9, verses 1 through 10. Now, even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For a tent was prepared, the first section, in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna and Aaron's staff that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second only the high priest goes, and he but once a year, and not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy places is not yet opened as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age. According to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed until the time of the Reformation. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, our author of Hebrews is continuing this description of Jesus' high priestly ministry. We started in chapter 4 and have walked through Jesus as the high priest, and then this section about Jesus' high priestly ministry. And the three things that the author is lifting up to us is the superiority of this covenant, this new covenant that we heard about last week, the sanctuary, which we'll start looking at today, and then the sacrifice. And the author uses this compare and contrast. He's holding before us the old and showing us how the new is better. We saw that last week in chapter 8, where he's holding up the old covenant and then showing us how the new is better in quoting Jeremiah. The covenant is better because it's internal and not external. The writing of the law was not on stone tablets. The writing of the law was on the hearts and minds of those that were in the covenant. There's a remembering sins no more, as opposed to the constant repetitive sacrifices for the sins of the people. And he finishes by saying, and this is important as we walk into chapter 9, he finishes by saying, in speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete, growing old and vanishing away. But it's important as we walk into chapter 9, which starts with a now, meaning it's connecting to the argument that was made before, that we don't downplay the old covenant as always being obsolete. It's always been obsolete. It's always been weak. It was a type and shadow of the new reality that was brought through Christ. It was given by God to his people at that time in his redemptive story, but it has always been pointing to a better reality, the reality where final and full redemption would be brought to God's people. And so it's a mistake to say that the old covenant has always been ineffective, totally and obsolete. God gave it to his people for a time in the redemptive history, the redemptive story, but now that Christ has come, it is now obsolete, fading away and vanishing. And we'll see as we look into the sanctuary and the description of the sanctuary how that argument is continued. But this passage, verses 1 through 10 of chapter 9, are really a setup for this next argument. this next argument about this sanctuary, better sanctuary or holy place. And so this week we talk about this contrast between what we saw in the old tabernacle, the old holy place, and what we need, what we're looking forward to in the new. And again, he uses this compare and contrast. He here talks about the tabernacle, and as we read, he talks about the furniture in the tabernacle. He talks about the layout. He talks about some of the processes, and he talks about the efficacy of what happened in the tabernacle. And as he's making this argument, as he's pushing on this nerve of the original audience, looking back towards the sacrificial system and saying, is this better? Is that better? That physical experience that we got to have, is that better? He's pushing on that nerve and saying, it's not better. And really, he could have summed up his argument by just saying, the tabernacle was not better, period, right? But what he does is a tact in persuasion. He brings them this visual picture. He says, remember Exodus, remember the tabernacle that God told them to build, remember when they built it, remember all the details. Get a visual picture of what is happening in that earthly sanctuary that he's trying to, so he's holding up this visual picture. And I wonder, it made me think of maybe something that might hit a little closer to home. Maybe when you were a kid, you had a childhood home or a bedroom that you remember fondly. Or you remember a special place that you went to when you were a child. Was there a temptation, even now as we think about that, was there a temptation to build that experience up? Remember how great it was, how fun it was, romanticizing the place, thinking about our childhood memories and how these specific places and experiences would just be lifted up in our minds. But have you ever had a chance to experience something that you experienced as a child again as an adult? Sometimes we're left with the thought of, is this it? My childhood room? Man, I had so much space. I could play basketball in the corner. I could throw things. I had all this stuff in my... And then you walk into your childhood room as an adult and you're like, it's kind of small. Look at how tiny that bed is. Maybe you don't feel disappointment, but you certainly get a sense of childhood memories not matching present expectations. The nostalgia clouding the reality of the moment. Would I have the same experience as an adult as I did as a child? Well, my experience was not necessarily a room or a childhood home. Mine was a family outing that we would sometimes go on. And it was going to an amusement park called Rocky Point Park. I'm from Rhode Island, so we have our own little culture, subculture, and this was a park that was like in folklore. But I remember as a child going on the rides and the games and the food, and I just thought it was the best place ever. It was great for my parents as well because it was about 20 minutes from our house. It scratched our itch. We never went to Disney growing up because we had Rocky Point, and that was good enough. That was a great experience for us. Well, the place has closed, but the footprint is still there, and it's a park, a state park. And I went as an adult. I think I took Deanna with me. And I had been playing up this amusement park, these rides and all this stuff. And I went there, and I was like, this was it. It feels small. It feels dated. Obviously, it was closed, so it was dated. My memory of my childhood experience, my memory of what I thought was this pinnacle of experience as a child was failing me. It didn't meet the reality. And so it makes me think, as the author brings this picture of the tabernacle that the people of his original audience would have held up in high esteem, if he's not pushing on that, is that nostalgia really all that it's cracked up to be? Is that really what you want? Is that really the experience that you think it is? He's holding it up